Raising the Conversation, a podcast by the MacRae Centre for Faith and Culture at Acadia Divinity College, with your host Joel Murphy, facilitator of trend research and analysis here at the MacRae Centre.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Raising Conversation podcast. My name is Joel Murphy. I'm excited to be with you today. I know I say that every time, but today we are joined by of somebody I met a couple months ago when we were doing some training down in the United States, and I'm really grateful that he's able to join us. And that person is Scott Shelton, who is the senior pastor at Heritage Baptist Church in Annapolis, Maryland, where he leads with a heart for community, creativity, and gospel-centered ministry. He also holds a doctorate of ministry in leadership and spiritual formation, and has written about. And I was going through a little bit of your doctoral work before our call, and I am so fascinated by it. But it kind of written on how churches can nurture cultures of humble exploration and responsive innovation, and did some really practical work around that, which I really appreciated. Scott blends deep theological insight and training with real-world leadership and experience and a passion for seeing churches thrive. And I've really enjoyed our limited interactions, and I'm really glad that you're able to be with us here today, Scott. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And I guess we'll just hop right into it because I know that, I'm excited. I think can have a good conversation today. But the first question that we've been asking is, why do you think it's important for Christian leaders today to pay attention to the future, and how has that shaped your own leadership or imagination when thinking about that future?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to think short term, kind of the mid-range term, but also the long term. And so that practically speaking, for me as a pastor of a local congregation, I often think, how does this impact 50 years from now? Not just how does that impact right now? And obviously the right now is important, the people in front of us, and most of the time that is where decisions are flowing. But I think there are more broad term things that really is like, so how do we shape the church into the future? And so for me, practically speaking, I would also say that for us in our context here in Maryland, people come to us, and we're a Baptist congregation, but we very much would probably be considered in a lot of different circles an ecumenical congregation. So when we think of the future and we think of where the church is headed, and even locally, like for us, we don't have a lot of people knocking on our door going, "Oh, I found a Baptist church. I'm a Baptist." We have people that are finding us because of the nature and the flow and the culture of our congregation. And so, but I think that those types of things are going to help carry the culture. The culture, I think, can outlive us a lot longer than the carpet color or whatever, so it really becomes about culture building for me. How do we think about this, and how does it spur on this innovative, just thinking critically, thoughtfully about everything that we do? Why do we do this in worship? Why is this there? Adding value to these things, adding that really builds the culture of a group of people that are curious about the things of God, and how that then relates to other people, and how that relates to people that come into our church. And so we ask those kinds of questions a lot. I think about it a lot. And so, but that has everything to do, in my opinion, with the future and where we are going to articulate in an intriguing way of living life in the context of faith. That in the United States, especially, that can very easily get hijacked in political realms, people that are even within the church, people that kind of move up, go from this size church to this size church to this size church. And so for me, I just want to keep asking, how do we live intriguingly, thoughtfully, this way of Jesus in this world, sacrificially. And so I'm drawn to people that live in intriguing ways, no matter what their belief is. I'm like, "Well, I want to learn from that person." And that spurs the faith on to me. So
Yeah.
um yeah.
I think that's really, I think the idea or the concept of like culture outlives us, or like recognizing that we are there's a humility around, I think, in what you're talking about, like why it's important as we think about the future is recognizing that we're not here forever. So even if we're not here at like in a particular position or a particular congregation or organization, the idea of thinking about the future is also then recognizing that we are not going to be there. So it's kind of this humble anticipatory piece, which I think is frames it really well. And so then I guess what question around that would be, what kind of scripture or theological perspectives have framed that kind of thinking for you when you're I want this to live on, want this to grow beyond me. I want to be able to set this up better than leave it better than when I first came.
Mhm.
Yeah, what kind of has framed that approach to thinking about the future?
Yeah, well, first I would say um pastors, people in church leadership need to be very intentional about their own spiritual formation. And so much of what I have experienced, what I have known church to be, has been, whether from a paid clergy staff or volunteers, but it is driven by ego. It is driven
Mm,
by my desires. This is what I like, and therefore you must like it. Um, and so, but a healthy spiritual life, formed in the image of Christ, I think is one by which we're asking different questions and we're thinking differently about things. I say that because the role of the pastor, what is the role of the pastor? And I tell people all the time, I was like, listen, if worship, like they would say, oh, I didn't like this about worship. I'm like, yeah, that wasn't my favorite either. But you don't want to come into a worship service probably that I would want to, because like I don't need to tiptoe into it. Like I'm like, let's go into silence. Let's spend 15 minutes in silence, and um and let's do taze music. Like I'm of that flair, that contemplative flair. I love that. But that's not always great for some people.
right.
Um and so but my the for me, the biblical reasoning for that is that Ephesians 4, um, it talks about. I have it somewhere. I don't want to start looking around, but that our job is to build up the body of Christ, that
Mhm.
we can be mature, that people can be the ones that are the exercising their own spiritual gifts and their callings. And it's not about just getting my way or whatever. So that has been formative for me. It's like I keep thinking about how can I give this away? We do
Mhm.
this in healthy moments. We do this when we think of cross-cultural missions. We think, how can I find an indigenous person that would then take this and really run with it? And like, how do you do that in a healthy way? But when we come to our own context, very similar to how we've grown up, we don't do that. We're not looking to give it away. We're looking to hold on and power and ego and well, that was my thought. That was my idea, which is stimulate a lot of my own research and my own drive towards like how do we create this moment of brainstorming.
Mm,
In general, I would say I not in general, I believe that God works with us. And God is, if when we're living in a healthy way, we're in pursuit of our own spiritual formation. And that, I'll say this, it takes hard work. Like that's not flippant. That is intentional. That is, you have to work hard to make time for that. So I've
mhm.
gone to counseling. I have a spiritual director. I have people that I talk to. I have contemplative prayer with other people every Monday at noon. Like I try to put myself kind of in that Romans 12, try to put myself in that moment where God can really form me in healthy ways and pull out some of um, my own limitations, my own the things that God wants to form in me. I Sabbath, I rest, I'm intentional. I have a rule of life
Mm.
that sort of guides me, so that my ego isn't driving me. Not, oh, well, this person, offered me a job. Not that that's happening or anything. It really isn't. But like,
Yeah.
you can. That can flare your ego, and it's like, who am I, what am I doing? So all that said was, when we're living out of that healthy space, I really deeply believe that God is like, I'm with you,
Mm.
let's do this. And so this idea of like, oh, we got to stop and we got to pray. It's like, no, you know what is right. God is working in you. So then you're able to respond in healthy and whole ways that
Mm.
aren't driven by your ego or whatever. And so I really do believe, Dallas Willard really framed this for me. This idea that we work with God, and I think we're working with God to create the future, that God works within humanity, and sometimes that it gets complicated, it gets weird, I think we can get it wrong, and in which case I think there's adjustments that perhaps God even makes, and God is saying, okay, well, here we are now, let's keep going, and God is on the lookout for people that are healthy and whole, that
Mm.
can help drive this message, and and it be a real beautiful, I Jesus centered, Jesus way of living in this world. So, which I would say, I want to be clear, because I think that contradicts some of this, like, overly simplified, maybe more black and white. Well, God just holds the future, and therefore, whatever God knows, or whatever. And I'm like, but what if God is working with us?
Mm.
What if God is asking you to become a part of that needed change? And that should drive us to excellence. That
Mm.
should drive us to spiritual health, and that the humility that comes into that is because I know what I'm capable of doing, what I'm capable of thinking, what I'm capable of desiring, and so therefore that drives me to go, God, I want to be healthy, I want to be whole, I want to be found completely in you, and 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 keeping this sense of, I want to keep arriving at this moment where I am, um, found new and complete in Christ.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different definitions that, I see so many people living out of insecure living, even men. So that so I'd say that even men that I interact with in so many different ways. Like, my son is a high school football player. He goes to school. He goes to an elite school, elite football program, and I, am with men that are successful from a variety of different ways, a variety of different perspectives, and I still see them
Mhm.
operating out of this insecure way, like out of, this is what I do. Their whole life is tied around a job or success or money or even their own children. And I'm like, whoa, this is not a healthy way of living. Um, so I want to keep finding myself in Christ in these ways. And so, I think men, especially, but I think just in general, people haven't been given permission to keep dreaming
Mm.
about what God would have them do. Uh, and I'd say, at every stage of life, I hope that we can, as a church, call people to keep dreaming.
Mm,
I mean, I have people that are nearing the end of their life, and I often see people fighting death with fear, like they're fearful. And so it becomes about looking back and this constant fight. But I also know people that are nearing the end of the last part of their life that are dreaming
mm,
about what eternity looks like. And I know children and youth and you talk about a time to dream. And so it's so easy to do that. But then when we hit midlife, sometimes dreams stop happening. It gets complicated. Well, I can't do that because I got these responsibilities or whatever. And I just want to keep saying, keep dreaming.
mm.
That may be true. That may be true for a season. You have responsibilities. I'm not calling it saying you should not do that, but I am saying that I think we ought to be dreaming about what could be. Because I think that's where the business of helping shape the future with God that we get to be a part of. And so, yeah, I
I,
don't,
yeah.
yeah,
No, I think I really like the idea of, well, a lot of that. I think dreaming, imagination is a big part that we like struggle with, but also that we need more of. And then even I'm struck by your comments around the importance of that kind of that internal development, that like understanding your ego. Because often I think when we think about the future, it can be informed by like, well, this is what I want, or this is what I think it should be. And we miss this kind of question or I think posturing of humility towards what the future could be and to be able to work and learn and partner with God around what is that future that is there, that God is inviting us into and being able to work with God to be able to bring the fullness of the kingdom um, to this moment, to where we are both in the present as well as potentially in that future. So I think that's a really important piece and kernel around like even our own posturing when we think about and that's a leadership trait, an important conversation within leadership as a whole, but especially when we think about the future. Um,
mm,
yeah.
yeah, I, I think this is why wisdom
Mm,
is so important because if it just revolves all around me, it's one of those, then we're all in trouble. But if it's something bigger that God is at work and doing, and I get to partner with that, there's a level of ease, a level of trust that we can enter into life. And so I don't, like, there's some people that approach the future of the church with fear.
mm,
Oh, we got to meet the budget. We got to meet the budget because, then this will happen, this will happen. And this idea of who is it? This non-anxious presence in our leadership style. Like if we come in with that same anxiety, boy, that is a bad position to be leading out of. You can lead out of it a little bit, but long term, that is not good. That's going to burn you out. But if you are leading out of this deep trust that you have in God
mhm,
and this belief that God and you're not nervous, then what a healthy position to be in. And so, where I see the church going potentially in the future, and where it could be, is more of bivocational, or I've heard of this term, which may be the same thing, but co-vocational.
mhm, mhm,
I'm not saying we're there yet. In certain parts of the world, we certainly are, and certain denominations and things are there. But but like when I bring that up sometimes to people, they're like, "Oh, Pastor, we would never let that happen." And I'm like, "Well, I want you to know I'm not nervous about that because if that day were to ever come, I trust that God would partner with my life and the people that I know, and we would figure something out together. And I
mhm.
mean, we would figure something out with God together. And maybe long term speaking, that might be what is absolutely best for the church. And so, but that requires a really healthy, deep sense of trust. And
Yeah.
so that has come. I don't, I mean, if you really put me to the fire, I'm sure there would be some anxiety that would be there. But how do we manage that? And how do we think about that? How do we think theologically about that? And so I, I want to approach the future without fear, and I want to approach it with open hands, and kind of going. I'm hopeful for what you're doing, God, and I want to be a part of that, not be resisting that,
Mm.
but walking into that. And to me, that means we have to have a healthy imagination. We have to be willing to sit around a table and say, okay, what is it that we need to do? What is it? What could we do in this situation? And really working ideas, embracing them as opposed to resisting them. So.
Can you share an example of when like you've been able to like I know you talk about it a little bit in even in your own research, but like whether recently or not about like when you were able to have an experience or a practice that allowed that to happen, where you saw this like, kind of we're around the table, we're thinking about it, we're holding things loosely, and we're discerning what God might be calling us into.
Hmm.
And if it worked or if it didn't, because but I think both of those are like I've been in both of those situations, and I'm sure many people who are listening have, um, and they're all good for the learning, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of one where it didn't like really pan out. Sometimes it pans out differently,
Mm.
but I would just say for pastors, for church leaders, for anybody, if you're starting, you can do some of this even within your own family with I would say this is partly the work of Edward de Bono, the book Six Thinking Hats, and it's really in particular is the green hat, which is this idea of how do we get all of the ideas onto the table. And what I find is that people need permission for that.
Mm.
And so, but in the context of a church, you need to start with really low-hanging fruit, is what I call it, but easy, low risk. You're not starting off brainstorming with how do we restructure the staff, right? You're more starting off with Sunday morning. How could we better greet people on
Mm.
Sunday mornings? And you say, so you start off with that. Like, all right, how do we greet people better? How do we, I mean, you can get real specific. How do we make the first 5 seconds of someone's point into the church really positive and maybe a little different than what they expected? And so you say that, and we've done something like this. And you say that, and then you literally write every single idea on, no matter what it is. So one of those dancing, wavy people out in front, those
Yeah, the
there's like
flappy
those air
inflatable man.
blowers. Yeah,
Yeah.
like all right, you write, air blower guy. And then what if we had someone who opened the door for every single person? Great, open the door for every single person. What about someone that took the coats for people? Took the coats for people. What if we had music playing? What if we made sure it was immediately, we had warm air, a nice heater right away when they came in. Boom. You just start writing all these ideas down. And what happens in the course of that is you gather more ideas. And again, I think we've done this. And then you're able to, you lose track of whose idea was whose. So then the ownership of the idea isn't held. But what often happens in that moment is like, oh, what if we had one of those wavy guys? And then somebody says, I mean, immediately, we couldn't do that. That would, we don't have an electrical cord out there. It's like, well, you could still do it. You could find a way. I have a friend at my former church that said, if you have enough time and enough money, you can do almost anything you want. And that particular person had enough time and money to do almost anything he wanted. He owned a business and stuff. And so I tended to trust that theory.
Yeah.
So, but we unfairly critique ideas so quickly that it never allows us to get to those spots where people are able to envision and hope
Mm.
um, and to think about what could be done. That's not going to necessarily be earth-shattering to really experiment with that. But you start doing that on a regular basis. You can't print the bulletins. The printer broke down. Well, all right, let's think of all that we could do to make Sunday morning and just be thoughtful about this.
Yeah.
Like, what are all the ideas that we could gather to make this good? My hunch is that if you really did that and
Mm.
really did not allow people to say no to anything, which that's the rule, you are not allowed to say no to anything. You have to write every single idea down. It is painful for people. It is painful for the devil's advocates in the room and all that stuff, but that is the rules. And if everyone's playing by the same rules, then you're allowed to express the crazy idea. But if you're not playing by the same rules, the crazy idea gets shut down and belittled, and then that would shrink someone like me down. I'm like, well, they don't really care what I think.
Right.
So
Mm.
anyway, and that to me, that is an area of church that I am absolutely fascinated with, and I spend energy on, and I want to think about every single thing. I mean, there's nothing that I could probably at my church, whether it be a physical thing, an internal thing, that I wouldn't say, well, let's think about that. Let's generate some ideas around this.
Yeah.
And I think that is also listening to each other. There's a discernment factor in that because it's a group of people. There's also, from a pastoral standpoint, there's actually protection in that because the ideas aren't just coming from you. Because you're able to say, well, I took those curtains down, but I met with 5 people and we all decided that together
Yeah.
because we were trying to figure out how to make this room better. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, there's things sometimes that people don't like. There's things that happen, ideas that come all the way to the surface that get picked and chosen and run with that I'm like, not my favorite, but it is what it is.
Right.
But it's not, my job isn't to just do everything I want. My
Right.
job is to equip the saints for works of good service, Ephesians 4.
Mm.
So, yeah,
Mm.
I don't know if that's a specific thing
Mm.
that I've done, but I would just say we do this enough around here that um, it's not much for us to jump into that kind of a brainstorming with the staff.
Mm.
And I'll say this too, this idea that the fear sometimes in this moment is that if I create a new idea, I'm going to have to keep creating that or reinventing that because that's only for a season. But what if you thought of ideas as something that they build upon each other, and the more creative you can be, and I don't even really like that word creative because so many pastors say, "Well, I'm not creative," and I
Mm.
just think it blows me away how many times people are like, "Well, I'm just not creative like that." And I'm like, "You are. You just have to be intentional about generating ideas." And so, but um, inside the church it is vital that we learn how to generate ideas at low levels because when the big stuff happens and we really need to generate healthy ideas, like how do we restructure our building, we have more space than we have need for. Well, what could we do to
Mm.
better serve our community? And if you're able to generate 20 or 30 ideas around a building, you know what that does to a congregation? They get charged up. They get kind of, they can rally around a mission. It's not just a empty wing of the church that's sitting over there, but now it's this mission hub
Mm.
of, oh, now there's a different group every night that meets there and things like that. So, and that
Yeah.
just takes leadership to stand up to someone who's saying, no, we couldn't do that. I'm like, yes, we could. Yes, we could. Don't say we couldn't. They say, well, Pastor, no, we can't because we don't, da. You're like, oh no, we could. If someone came in tomorrow and gave me $1 million and said, oh, we want to revamp that area for something really good, I think we could do that. Well, that wouldn't happen. How do you know that wouldn't happen?
Right. Yeah.
So, but we
Oh,
never get to that spot because um, we're we're negative and we're not discerning a lot of times and we're not trusting that God is going to provide. So I believe where God's will is, his provision is also.
hmm.
And so if God is calling us to do something, he's going to provide a way. If we're not, if it's not being provided for, maybe we need to look around and go, maybe we're not called to do that anymore.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that, we're like, well, we've done it for 40 years. That's fine. But like, we can't find the volunteers. People are no longer coming. Like, why are we still beating the drum and beating ourselves up and feeling like a failure every week when that's not like I'll take for example, English is the second language. Our church used to do this very effectively. And this was all before I got here.
Hmm.
Had a large group of people from our immigrant brothers and sisters, and we worked with them on English. Um, but you know what happened? The community college began to start an ESL program, and they have resources. They have ways of doing this effectively, offering it multiple times, and our numbers dwindled. And this is all before I got here. This wonders why I think it's a culture thing too. But they looked around and they said, "Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we should bless that work that the community
Yeah.
college is doing,
Hmm.
and put our efforts to something else." And so that's what happened.
Hmm.
And so we let things ebb and flow in and out. We do things and then we let things die off. And that's, I think, part of the normal part of church. But how many things we hold on to?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the challenge. I think that's a great example of like flexibility and adaptability, but also just like it seems maybe simple, but like just asking questions. But I think like the hard part or the nuanced element of it is like not shutting it down. And often I feel whether it's somebody externally or even internally, like, oh, I couldn't do like it gets back to that character piece, like whether it's like if it's self-doubt, like I can't do that or I'm not able
Hmm.
or that person wouldn't be like or if it's external saying no, we're not, like I think there's a beautifully simple but complex idea of just like asking and thinking about ideas. um and so I guess like the kind of like the final question that's been framing these conversations, I think is it flows into really well, is this idea of hope. And so, and you've kind of alluded to it, I think in a few different spots, but when you think about the future, what gives you hope? And then what kind of encouragement would you offer leaders who are maybe kind of have that feeling of uncertainty or holding or fear as they hold on to what's happening as the end as they think about what comes ahead?
Mm. Yeah, I would say number one, I wouldn't dismiss that. I think that's real, and you gotta wrestle with that. And why is that fear in your life? And really help yourself come to terms with that, because only when you're able to do that more, do the hard work of sitting in silence, of discerning, seeking out like a counselor, because sometimes fear comes from deep places. My spiritual director always reminds me, not fear but anger. Anger always comes from some other place. um, and and kind of that unleashed anger. I think the same thing can be true for fear. That's coming from someplace. So digging down and figuring out, why does this make me fearful? Well, I'll feel alone, or I'll feel worthless, or I'll feel like a failure. I mean, dig down into those spaces, and then it allows you to then um, learn to keep trusting God. And so learning to operate and lead not out of sense of insecurity, but of deep trust and hope in this. There's lots of strategies that I employ for that. Some of them is when I can feel myself getting worked up, if I'm in a meeting or whatever, I really try hard. I'll try to detach myself from that, like even emotionally. Sometimes I'll even physically pull back, and just be like, what would I say if I was consulting someone in this moment?
Mm.
And so those things, but that influences the culture. And so I would say leaders that feel uncertain, if you were to be completely detached, what would you say to someone that was in your situation? Like walk around, I know pastors that walk around their church and pretend like they have, it's they're, we call it in view of a call, but they're coming to, interview at the church and walk around with this sense of like what could be,
Mm,
um, and letting those dreams build in you in really unique ways. Like I mean that sincerely. Like you got to walk around sometimes and just dream about what could be. Because like even my place, it's really great. It's a healthy place, but there's still things I dream about. And what could be? What would it look like if?
right.
All
Right.
of that. Um, and so
Mm,
my hope really does come from people that are, I would say, catching the culture without me verbally articulating the culture.
mm, mm,
So they're expressing their love of this church, the local congregation, and the reasons why in their language, in their way. And I think I've never had that conversation with them.
mm, mhm,
I've never done that. That's what gives me hope. I have a mentor that says, um, he told me once, he said that the people that need to find you are going to find you. And there's a trust that I have in that because I might get into situations or with a family or whatever, like this doesn't, we're not theologically aligned, or there's some sense of, uh, someone's not quite ticking, and I'm like, I, I, I bless them and all these things, but sometimes they will move on, and that can be discouraging or whatever, or it can be like maybe they need to find their place. But I also know in that same moment, there's other people that need me and what God has done in me and is revealing through me and with my church in so many different ways. And that authentic nature is, I think, really what is builds in people. I would just say kind of also you have to be authentic.
mm.
Like the I don't know what the right way of saying it is, but like I call it like the BS detector is
Yeah.
really, really high. Like
Yeah.
people get it. I call BS a lot on people, just like they're, whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's also moments with people I'm like, wow, they're
Mm,
they're for real. This is beautiful. This is wonderful. And I want to be genuine in all that I can be in that. And that comes from from where I'm at as the pastor, and never lying, but working really hard to make sure I'm operating in healthy ways. Or if I come into a situation and it's like I can pull myself out, like, you know what, I've struggled today. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna just give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back or whatever. I just have to center myself before I come into this meeting.
mm,
Um,
mhm.
and just not be rushed. Eugene Peterson calls it the unhurried pastor. Like, this is what I think people need and want.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I think that's awesome. And there's so much really useful and practical and I think genuine talking about authenticity, like genuine insights there, Scott. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your passion for people. I think that really is the thing that I've that's come through in our conversations, both in this one but in previous, and that is grounded in a deep love and care for others. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your insights and your perspective with us today. And I'm hopeful and anticipate that it'll be useful to people. So thank you.
awesome. Thanks for having me.